I'm literally the last one standing between you and that door in terms of going home. Now, you have a chance now. Can't see you really. You have a chance now. If anybody wants to still sneak out, then that's fine. I'm actually ready to go home. I mean, there were 10 really good talks. I learned a lot. My brain is basically full, so I'm really ready to go. So, last chance for you. No. I can't really go. Jenny told me earlier I have to work for my food that I have consumed earlier. So I have to actually go through. Now, I learned a lot about storytelling as well. So here's my story. The handsome-looking gentleman there with a circle around his head, that's my dad. That's his his middle school class photo when he was about 16 years old in Germany. Well, he would have been 16 years old technically in any country, but this was taken in Germany when he was 16 years old. Shortly after this picture was taken, he started working. So he didn't go to high school, he didn't go to university, he didn't get a college degree, he went straight to work. And he went to work in a government-owned company. He started basically at a low level, at a level of basically an office boy, if you want. That government-owned company was a fire insurance company. That's just on a side note, basically. It's a fire insurance company owned by the government. Fire insurance was made mandatory, and this was the only company that could offer it. It's a pretty good business concept, I think. You force everybody to have insurance, and you're the only company that can do that. So he started at the age of 16 at this company, and this is a picture of my dad when he retired from the exact same company 44 years later. He retired as its director of that company. So he spent his whole working life, from 16 years old all the way to retirement age, in this particular company without changing. He went through the ranks, went all the way to the top. Now, if you look at working today, it is virtually impossible to think about that anybody would stay in a company for their whole working lifetime. Now, if you imagine for most of you, if you graduate, for example, next year, you're going to retire in the year 2060 or even later. That's a hell of a long time. And it is unlikely that you're going to spend all that time in the same company. So there will be some moving around, some fluctuations in there. Let's look around, take a look at why this might be the case. Now, why is there a change from basically a loyalty principle, at least in Germany at that time? If you switch companies, you showed no loyalty. So loyalty was something that was very important. Nowadays, that's really not that important. But let's look at now how companies used to operate and how they, I think at least, in my views, how they will operate in the future. Now, one basic thing that does not work. There it is. So this is how companies operate or used to operate in a very hierarchical system. And that's a company that my dad worked in a way. So he started at the very bottom, which is actually much further below here, and started to work his way up. By the way, I love this screen. I'm going to get one of those for home. Just imagine watching football on a screen like this. So this is still how most companies now, especially in Asia, including Malaysia, work. Now, I do a lot of corporate training, and I see this a lot. So this is what's called a control structure. You have control from the top all the way down, step by step by step by step. So if you are somewhere here or further below, you're going to have a hard time getting noticed. You'll be quite lonely. So if we home into a bit greater detail, this is just how it basically worked for a particular team. Now you have the top, you have the manager, and you have members of that team, but it's still quite isolated, quite hierarchical. That's how it used to be, and in quite a number of companies, especially if you look at government, it still works like this, but that's not the way it should be. Now we want to look as an example at a particular employee. Now let's just pick one. Let's call her Jenny for no other purpose. Jenny, if I look at this picture or the one before, I would not be able to find Jenny because she's somewhere diluted out in that hierarchical structure, so that's not really working there. But if I look at how a group works, then I can actually find Jenny. And Jenny is here. So Jenny is now part of a group of people she's working with. In the center could be the manager, doesn't have to be. Now, something about Jenny. Jenny is very, very good at her job. Now, Jenny is a specialist in what she's doing. Really good. So that's the good news. So whenever she's involved in a project for her team, the project has a high likelihood to succeed. The bad thing is that Jenny is a specialist. So not every project that this group is working on needs to involve her. So she has times during work where she has a lot of stuff to do. She has fun doing it. She's willing and happy to contribute to that team. Other times, the team can work very well without her. So she's kind of bored. On top of that, the manager is also a moron. But that's on the side note. So Jenny is sometimes happy, but sometimes not happy. So in terms of work, she is not satisfied in her current working environment, especially during times when she is bored out of this. Now, on a separate scenario, let's say within the same company, within the same organization, you also have another team. This time, it's a very good manager. Let's call him Frank. So this manager now has a problem. This manager has a very productive team, but is missing a team member who supposedly have that knowledge and that specialization that Jenny could provide. Now, in a big organization like this manager needs to fill that position. So what's he going to do? He goes to HR and says, can I hire somebody? And HR says, no money, cannot. So they have to make use with what there is. He doesn't have anybody, so the project will suffer from it. Because the company is so big, and because there's no communication going on, he doesn't know that Jenny exists on the other side and is bored. So how, if there would be a system that could allow Frank, or whatever you want to call him, Frank, to know that there is a Jenny. That way, Jenny could fill in the blank that is left by a staff that either has resigned before or was never there in the first place or is required. So Jenny could then fill up her time during the time that she has nothing to do for the orange group to work for the other group. So that way she could help this particular project to move forward and she would have more input in this. Sounds like a fairly easy thing to do in principle, but the realization is not quite as easy. Now, what would be a good method for, let's say, this particular manager to know that Jenny is around in a big organization? The easiest tool for this would be something that everybody of you is familiar with, and that would be a social media. So imagine if a company, especially if it's a bigger company, has its own internal social media. Really like a small LinkedIn if you want. So you have your own profile on it, you have your own areas of specialization on it, and maybe some other stuff as well about you. Then, in that case, so if Jenny would have, for example, something like this in an internal LinkedIn, that manager would very easily be able to find her. Get in touch with her, ask her, would you like to join our team temporarily until this project is finished, and then you move on. So that by itself is easily possible. Now, who's going to evaluate Jenny then? In the current hierarchical structure that you saw earlier, that is still widely practiced here, it's the manager who's gonna, or the supervisor, whatever, it's generally the manager who's give you an annual evaluation. So once a year, you're gonna be called in, and the manager says, what's your name again? Then how did you do? And then, so you get some kind of evaluation that is sometimes subjective and sometimes just not so real. And since that manager is a moron, as we established earlier, the evaluation that Jenny gets might not be the best. On top of that, she has worked for a different team. So that moron, he didn't quite like that because he lost control. So he's going to give Jenny a bad rap for that. So that's not in benefit either. How to make that better? Since I talked about social media or social media network, if you know LinkedIn, for example, LinkedIn has a section for skills evaluation and for recommendations. Same thing could be done in an internal network. So if Jenny works for this manager could leave on the internal network a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, depending on how well she did, a rating. all these ratings that can then be accumulated over time, let's say over a year, and could be a part of the overall evaluation that Jenny faces at the end of the year. That would then determine whether she gets promoted and so on. So by right, this is fairly easily possible. It's just not been implemented. Same could be for colleagues that she works with. They could leave a feedback as well. So there's really a much wider engagement that is possible and a much wider input base that is possible. Now, what happens if there are two different companies later on? So let's say Jenny works for this particular company. At some point, now she's going to be pissed off because the manager is still a moron and she's still bored and whatever. So Jenny says, I've had it. I'm going to go and freelance. Now, I take my skills, my very specific targeted skills, and I become an independent contractor. So then, next time, if, let's say this is company A, company B, if they are in need of somebody of those skills, they would simply get in touch with Jenny. Jenny, can you do this for us? Send us a quotation. We hire you for that particular project. After that, you're out. Good thing for the company is, company doesn't have to have so much overhead. So a company over time can actually shrink a lot. You can outsource a lot of stuff. No, not only specific technical skills. Yesterday on BFM I heard internal auditors are now being outsourced as well, something that I would have thought should be very internal. But everything that can be outsourced will eventually be outsourced. Companies, as I will see it, will become very, very small in terms of a core size. So HR will be some of them, obviously manufacturing part will be some of them, but the core size will shrink quite a bit. And a lot of the additional work that needs to be done for the company will be done by independent contractors, by people who the work is then outsourced to, just like Jenny and thousands of others. Now, what that means for you, and I mean, I can't predict how it's going to be, but as I said, if you retire, it's going to be at least 2060, so a lot of stuff can happen until then. What this could mean for you is that degrees don't count anymore. Degrees are of no value later on. The only thing that counts is the technical knowledge that you have to provide the services that the companies require. That is one thing. But that's not going to be enough. Because you're now dealing with all kinds of different teams, different people, other skills, the non-technical skills also need to be developed. Those include communication skills, for example, EQ, empathy, all the other leadership skills, all the other skills that are often called soft skills, which there should not be. So skills that are non-technical, those also need to be developed. So if you just focus on being a geek, for example, just to provide geek service, it's not going to work in the long run either. So universities will have to pick up the slack at some point in terms of at least the technical part. But for you, it's also becoming more and more important to put more emphasis into what used to be called soft skills, in skills that are the non-technical ones, like communication, like EQ and so on, which will enable you to work with all kinds of different teams more or less seamlessly. So keep that in mind if you want, and I wish you happy retirement in 2060 then. Thank you very much.